Just 2 weeks into our marriage, Mark and I received the most incredible news. I was pregnant. It was a moment of pure joy, and we couldn't wait to start this new chapter of our lives together. Mark, always the supportive partner, embraced fatherhood with enthusiasm. From the moment we found out, he became my anchor, offering constant encouragement and care. Every doctor's visit felt like a celebration. Mark accompanied me to each appointment, holding my hand during the ultrasounds as we watched our baby growing. The way he smiled at me during those moments filled me with hope and happiness. Together, we started preparing for our little one's arrival, transforming a spare room into a nursery with furniture and tiny clothes we picked out with love. At 28 weeks, my closest friends threw me a baby shower. The house was filled with laughter, thoughtful gifts, and warm wishes. It was a perfect day until I felt a sharp, unexpected pain. I gasped, clutching my stomach, and the room fell silent. The concern on my friends' faces was palpable. "I think something's wrong," I managed to say, struggling to stay composed. My friend Sophia acted quickly, calling Mark and helping me to the car. The pain intensified as we raced to the hospital, fear and uncertainty clouding what should have been the happiest time of my life. At the hospital, the doctor confirmed I was in premature labor. I was terrified but tried to stay strong as Mark arrived, his face a mixture of worry and determination. To everyone's surprise, I gave birth to not one, but 3 tiny miracles: Scott, Doris, and Peter. Born at just 28 weeks, they were whisked away to the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, their tiny bodies needing extra care and attention. For 5 long days, I stayed in the hospital visiting the triplets in the NICU every chance I got. Seeing their fragile forms hooked up to monitors was both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring. Mark and I clung to each other during those difficult moments, determined to give them the love and strength they needed. When the doctors finally cleared the babies to go home, we felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. As we carried our triplets through the door of our house, I looked at Mark and whispered, "We can do this." For a moment, I believed we could face anything as a team. The first few days at home with the triplets were overwhelming, but I believed Mark and I could handle it together. We spent countless sleepless nights feeding and soothing Scott, Doris, and Peter, often collapsing into bed just before the next feeding began. I felt exhausted but content, thinking we were adjusting to our new life as parents. However, it didn't take long for Mark's behavior to change. At first, he seemed distracted, glued to his phone or staring out the window while I tended to the babies. He started disappearing for hours at a time, often under the guise of running errands or needing some air. His excuses became flimsier by the day. One evening, as I rocked Scott to sleep, I realized Mark hadn't returned from a trip to the store. I called him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Hours later, he finally walked through the door, carrying the diapers I had asked for. His explanation for being late was vague, and his distant demeanor left me feeling uneasy. As the days went on, Mark's absence became more noticeable. He was no longer the attentive, supportive partner he had been during my pregnancy. Instead, I found myself carrying the weight of parenthood alone, struggling to meet the demands of 3 newborns. The man I once leaned on now felt like a stranger. Despite my growing concerns, I pushed my doubts aside, hoping that Mark was just adjusting to the stress of being a new father. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As the days turned into weeks, Mark's absences grew longer and more frequent. He would leave for hours without explanation and return with vague excuses that only deepened my suspicion. I tried to convince myself that he was just overwhelmed, but his behavior told a different story. The man who had once been my rock now seemed like he wanted nothing to do with me or our children. One night, after another exhausting day of caring for the triplets alone, I decided I couldn't keep ignoring the warning signs. Mark had left in the morning, claiming he needed to clear his head, and hadn't returned by dinner time. Frustrated and worried, I called him repeatedly, but his phone went straight to voicemail. My anger and anxiety grew with each passing hour. When Mark finally walked through the door late that night, the smell of unfamiliar perfume hit me before he even said a word. My heart sank as I stared at him, his disheveled appearance confirming my worst fears. "Where have you been, Mark?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "Out," he replied curtly, avoiding my gaze as he set his keys on the counter. "Out? That's all you have to say?" I snapped, stepping closer to him. "I've been here alone, taking care of our 3 children while you disappear for hours. What's going on with you?" Mark sighed heavily, as though my questions were an inconvenience. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered. "Try me," I fired back. "Because right now it feels like you're hiding something. You've been distant, Mark. You're never here. If there's something you need to tell me, now's the time." Instead of answering, Mark turned his back to me, heading toward the bedroom. I stood frozen, my chest tightening with the realization that the man I thought I knew was slipping further away. The final blow came the next day when I found his phone on the kitchen counter, buzzing with a new message. My curiosity got the better of me, and I picked it up. The message was from a woman named Rachel and read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again tonight." My hands shook as I scrolled through the rest of the conversation. The explicit messages and photos left no doubt. Mark was having an affair. The weight of Mark's betrayal crushed me as I stared at the messages on his phone. My chest tightened and tears streamed down my face, but along with the heartbreak came a surge of anger. I had carried the burden of raising our triplets alone while he entertained another woman. It wasn't just infidelity, it was abandonment, deceit, and a complete disregard for our family. That evening, Mark came home as if nothing had happened. He walked into the house, dropped his keys on the counter, and sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Who's Rachel?" I demanded, standing in front of him with my arms crossed. Mark froze, his face darkening. "What are you talking about?" He replied defensively. "I'm talking about the messages on your phone," I said, my voice trembling. "I know about the affair, Mark. Don't lie to me." He stood abruptly, towering over me. "You had no right to go through my phone," he shouted. "And you had no right to betray me," I shot back. "While I've been here, sacrificing everything for our children, you've been with her. How could you do this to us?" Mark's expression twisted with rage. "You don't get it, do you?" he snapped. "I never wanted this. I never wanted 3 kids, a life full of stress and responsibilities. I feel trapped, Nancy. You're suffocating me." His words stung like a slap. "Suffocating you? I've been raising these kids by myself while you run around with someone else. You're a coward, Mark. You promised to be here for us, but all you've done is abandon your family." The argument escalated as Mark's anger boiled over. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked it violently. I screamed in pain, tears streaming down my face as he pulled me closer. "You've ruined my life," he hissed, his face inches from mine. Then, with a disgusting show of contempt, he spat directly into my face. The humiliation was unbearable, and I felt my knees weaken as he released me. The commotion drew the attention of the neighbors, and I heard footsteps outside. Mark turned on his heel and stormed toward the door. "Good luck raising those kids alone," he sneered, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, trembling and humiliated, clutching my aching scalp. The sound of the triplets crying in the next room pulled me out of my daze. I wiped my face and rushed to them, holding each one close as tears of anger, heartbreak, and fear streamed down my cheeks. Mark was gone, and I was truly alone. The house felt unbearably quiet after Mark's departure, except for the cries of my 3 newborns. Each wail pierced through the chaos in my mind, grounding me in a reality I wasn't ready to face. Mark was gone, and with him went the promise of shared responsibilities. I was left to care for Scott, Doris, and Peter on my own. That night, as I rocked one baby to sleep while the other 2 fussed in their cribs, I realized the full weight of my situation. My hair still hurt from where Mark had yanked it, and the humiliation of him spitting in my face replayed in my mind like a cruel reminder of my new reality. The man I had trusted, loved, and built a life which had shattered everything in a single moment of rage. The following days were a blur of exhaustion and survival. I barely slept, snatching a few minutes of rest whenever the triplets dozed off. My body ached from the constant feeding, changing, and rocking, but I refused to let myself break. Every time I looked at my babies, I reminded myself that they didn't deserve to suffer because of Mark's choices. They were innocent and they needed me. Mark's absence was glaring. He didn't call, didn't check in, didn't even bother to see if we were okay. I tried reaching out once, leaving a voicemail, but the silence on the other end was deafening. It was clear Mark had washed his hands of us completely. Despite the pain and betrayal, I forced myself to focus on small victories. I learned how to juggle 3 crying babies without breaking down. I managed to get groceries delivered when I couldn't leave the house. I even started making lists of things I needed to do to rebuild my life. But no matter how much I tried to stay strong, the nights were the hardest. Once the babies were asleep, the quiet house felt like a void. I'd sit on the couch, staring at the nursery monitor, and cry until I was too tired to cry anymore. I didn't know how I was going to get through this, but I knew I had to, for my children. Several days passed, and I had begun to accept that I was completely on my own. The thought of raising 3 children without any support terrified me, but I knew I had no other choice. Then, unexpectedly, there was a knock at the door one afternoon. When I opened it, I was surprised to see Thomas, Mark's best friend. His face was a mixture of concern and hesitation. "Hey, Nancy," he said softly. "I heard about what happened. Are you okay?" I wanted to put on a brave face, but the exhaustion and heartbreak were too overwhelming. "No, Thomas, I'm not okay," I admitted, tears spilling over. "Mark left. He's not coming back. I don't even know how I'm supposed to do this alone." Thomas stepped inside and glanced at the living room, which was filled with baby supplies, piles of laundry, and 3 tiny cribs. "I can't believe he did this," he said, shaking his head. "You don't deserve this, Nancy. None of you do." He didn't press me for details about Mark's actions. Instead, he asked how he could help. At first, I hesitated, unsure if I could trust anyone so closely tied to Mark. But Thomas's genuine kindness shone through, and I found myself letting him in. He spent the rest of the afternoon helping me with the triplets, rocking them to sleep, folding laundry, and even washing dishes. For the first time in days, I felt a small sense of relief. Over the next few days, Thomas continued to check in. He brought groceries, baby supplies, and even watched the triplets while I caught up on some much-needed sleep. I hadn't realized how much I needed help until it was offered. Slowly, I began to trust him. One evening, as we sat on the couch after the triplets were asleep, Thomas hesitated before speaking. "Nancy, I need to tell you something about Mark," he said, his voice heavy. I tensed, bracing myself for whatever he was about to reveal. "What is it?" I asked. He looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "Mark, he's been seeing someone else for a while now. That's why he's been distant." I didn't want to believe it, but it's true. Even though I already knew about the affair, hearing it confirmed by someone else felt like another dagger to my heart. "I thought as much," I said quietly. "He didn't just betray me. He abandoned his children." Thomas nodded, his expression pained. "You deserve better than this, Nancy. Mark made his choice, but I'm here to help however I can." As I sat there, processing his words, I realized something. While Mark had chosen to walk away, I still had people willing to stand by me. And with their support, I could find the strength to rebuild my life. With Thomas's help, I began to slowly regain control of my life. He became a steady presence, showing up every day to assist with the triplets. Whether it was changing diapers, preparing bottles, or rocking the babies to sleep, Thomas was always there, ready to help without hesitation. His patience and kindness were a stark contrast to Mark's recent behavior, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. One morning, as I sat at the dining table sorting through bills, Thomas approached with a suggestion. "Have you thought about going back to work?" he asked gently. "I can watch the kids if you need some time to figure things out." The idea hadn't even crossed my mind. Between the sleepless nights and emotional turmoil, I had been in survival mode, focusing only on the day-to-day needs of my children. I don't know, I admitted. It feels impossible to manage work and the kids right now. Thomas smiled encouragingly. You're stronger than you think, Nancy. I can help. You don't have to do this alone. His words planted a seed of hope. Over the next few weeks, I started updating my resume and looking for job openings. Thomas continued to step in, watching the triplets while I applied for positions and prepared for interviews. His unwavering support made me feel like I could finally see a way forward. While I focused on rebuilding, the reality of Mark's abandonment loomed in the background. Bills piled up, and I discovered he had left behind a trail of unpaid debts. Worse, I learned he had not even informed his family about the triplets' birth, effectively erasing us from his life. One afternoon, while organizing paperwork, I found Mark's old bank statements and credit card bills. They revealed a string of reckless expenses, including charges for luxury dinners and hotel stays, likely tied to his affair. Anger boiled inside me as I realized the extent of his selfishness. Not only had he walked away from his responsibilities, but he had also left me to clean up his financial mess. I shared the discovery with Thomas, who was equally appalled. This is unacceptable, he said. He doesn't just get to walk away without consequences. Together, we decided to take legal action. I filed for full custody of the triplets and included evidence of Mark's financial neglect and abandonment. The process was daunting, but with Thomas's encouragement, I pushed forward. Every step felt like reclaiming the power Mark had taken from me. Despite the challenges, life began to stabilize. I landed a job at a private law firm, which allowed me to provide for my children. The days were long, balancing work and motherhood, but the triplets thrived under the love and care they received. Thomas became a father figure to them, stepping into a role Mark had rejected. Scott, Doris, and Peter adored Thomas. They lit up whenever he entered the room, and their laughter filled the house during playtime. Watching them bond with him brought a warmth to my heart I hadn't felt in a long time. Though I still carried the scars of Mark's betrayal, I started to feel hope for the future. With Thomas's unwavering support, I realized that I wasn't just surviving, I was beginning to thrive. 12 years passed, and life had taken on a sense of normalcy. The triplets, Scott, Doris, and Peter, were thriving, and Thomas and I had built a stable, loving home. He was more than a father figure to the kids. He was their rock, the man who had stepped in when their biological father walked away. Then one seemingly ordinary day, Mark reappeared. I was at work, reviewing documents in my office, when my secretary informed me of an unexpected visitor. He says he's your ex-husband, she said, her tone uncertain. The words sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't heard from Mark in over a decade. Bracing myself, I walked into the reception area, and there he was. Time had not been kind to him. His once proud demeanor had been replaced with an air of desperation. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale, and his eyes hollow. "What are you doing here, Mark?" I asked coldly, motioning for him to follow me into my office. Mark hesitated before speaking. "Nancy, I need help," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Things haven't been easy for me." I folded my arms, keeping my distance. "You abandoned me and your children. You have no right to ask for help." His face fell, but his tone quickly turned defensive. I wasn't ready for all of that back then. I made mistakes, but I'm here now. Here now, I repeated, incredulous. "Where were you when your kids were crying through the night? When I had to work 2 jobs to keep food on the table? You don't get to walk back in and act like nothing happened." Mark leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "Look, I'm broke. I have debts I can't pay off. I just need a little money to get back on my feet." I let out a bitter laugh. "You walked away from us and left me to fend for myself. Why should I give you anything?" Mark's expression hardened. "Because I'm still their father." "You're nothing to them," I fired back. "Thomas has been more of a father than you ever were. You don't deserve their love, or mine." The conversation ended there. I told him to leave, and though he stormed out of my office, I could tell this wasn't over. Mark wasn't done disrupting our lives. A few days later, While I was at work, he showed up unannounced at our home. Thomas answered the door, surprised to see him. "What are you doing here, Mark?" Thomas asked, his voice firm but calm. Mark smirked. "Came to see my kids. I have every right to be here." "You gave up that right when you abandoned them," Thomas replied, standing his ground. Mark's smirk faltered, replaced by a sneer. "You think you've won, don't you? Playing house with my family? I'm still their father, and Nancy will always know I was here first." Thomas didn't flinch. "If you really cared about them, you wouldn't have left." Mark stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "If you don't want Nancy finding out the whole truth, you'll give me what I want, $50,000. That's all I need to keep my mouth shut." Thomas's jaw tightened. "What truth?" "The bet," Mark said, a sly grin spreading across his face. "The one we made about her. You never told her, did you?" Thomas stared at him, stunned but unwavering. "Get out," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're not welcome here." Mark chuckled as he turned to leave. "You've got until Saturday to figure it out." When I got home that evening, Thomas's demeanor was unusually tense. After we put the triplets, now teenagers, to bed, he finally sat me down, his face etched with worry. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice shaky. I leaned forward, concerned. "What is it, Thomas?" He hesitated before finally saying, "Mark came by today. He's trying to blackmail me. He said he'll tell you about a bet we made about you years ago." "A bet?" I asked, my heart sinking. "What kind of bet?" Thomas took a deep breath. "Back when Mark and I first met you, we were both immature. He made a drunken bet about who could win you over first. It was stupid, and I regret it more than you know. But Nancy, I need you to understand that I fell for you. Truly. This wasn't about the bet for me. It was about you." I stared at him, stunned. My mind raced, revisiting memories of Mark, his betrayal, and now this revelation about Thomas. But then I thought about everything Thomas had done for me and the kids, the years of unwavering support, his love, his sacrifices. "You think I'd hate you for something so ridiculous?" I finally said, surprising even myself with my calmness. "Thomas, you've been my rock. You've been the father my kids needed. Whatever happened back then doesn't matter anymore. What matters is who you are now." Thomas's eyes widened. "You're not angry?" I shook my head. "Angry at Mark?" "Yes. But not at you. He's the one who's still trying to hurt us. And I'm not going to let him." After that conversation, I knew we couldn't let Mark continue to manipulate us. Together, Thomas and I began to gather evidence. We documented Mark's blackmail attempt, his years of abandonment, and his failure to provide financial support for the triplets. Every message, every phone call, every detail of his threats was recorded. With the evidence in hand, we went to the authorities. Mark's pattern of behavior was clear, and the police took our case seriously. They assured us that his actions would not go unpunished. It didn't take long for Mark's crimes to catch up with him. He was arrested and charged with blackmail and neglect. During his trial, the evidence we presented painted a damning picture of his character. Witnesses, including Thomas and me, testified about his abandonment and manipulative tactics. The judge didn't hold back. Mark was sentenced to several years in prison, and the weight of his actions finally fell on him. For the first time, I felt a sense of closure. He could no longer disrupt our lives or hurt our family. With Mark behind bars, a new chapter began for our family. Thomas and I felt a renewed sense of peace, knowing that the toxic presence of my ex-husband was finally out of our lives. The triplets thrived, growing into kind, resilient young adults who carried the love and support we had built around them. As I stood in our living room one evening, watching Thomas laugh with the kids, I realized how far we had come. Mark's betrayal no longer defined our story. Our lives were now a testament to resilience, love, and the strength it takes to rebuild after loss. Thank you so much for reading this story. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel for more stories like this. Your support means the world to me and helps me share more incredible content with you. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing from you. Stay tuned for the next story, and thank you for being a part of this journey.